So the next day, Thetis delivers Achilles' new armor, including a new shield on which Hephaestus has represented the cosmos, and the narrator describes what is depicted on this shield quite movingly and quite exquisite detail for a few hundred lines. So there's quite a bit of, let's say, descriptive energy devoted to this. And this gets to a point I alluded to earlier about the nature of the epic as pointing in subtle ways to the poetic art, and that the poet, like the gods in this case, is able to depict a world, and the poets are really the ones that hold in their hands, their words, so to speak, the possibility of an Achilles or any other hero living on eternally in glory. So in the shield, and we'll see a diagram of it in a slide here, the next slide, but on the shield are depicted in concentric circles, and the description moves from the center outwards. So in concentric circles, there are first depicted kind of constellations, sky, and sea, and then two cities, a city at peace and a city at war. And we're going to read a description of that passage where they describe the city at peace and the city at war. Then there's scenes of pastoral tranquility and wildlife. And then there's a depiction of this river ocean that's, according to the Greek way of thinking, went around the whole of the cosmos. So Jeremy points out the shield had multiple pages of description and the rest of the armor had a sentence. So, which is true. Yeah, the rest of the armor got short shrift. I think again, I think it comes down to the importance of this, the depiction of the scene here, as well. There's a lot going on in the depiction of the scene. In a way, the shield and what Hephaestus depicts on it becomes, in a way, a microcosm of the epic itself. It becomes a little way of seeing what's going on in the epic. So too, we're going to see depictions of cities at peace, cities at war. And in a way, we need to think about how does Homer, in a way, show us all these things as well. So let's go to the passage here I've highlighted. So we'll go to book 18, line 572. So we'll find that. So this is a description of that city, and city at peace, city at war. And he forged on the shield, the he is Hephaestus, the god, the forging god. On the shield, two noble cities filled with mortal men, with weddings and wedding feasts in one, and under glowing torches they brought forth the brides from the women's chambers, marching through the streets, while choir on choir the wedding song rose high. And the young men came dancing, whirling round in rings, and among them flutes and harps kept up their stirring call. Women rushed to the doors, and each stood moved with wonder. And the people massed, streaming into the marketplace, where a quarrel had broken out, and two men struggled over the blood price for a kinsman just murdered. So I'll stop there. A couple things. So first of all, try to imagine. So remember what I described that's all depicted there. It's kind of impossible to try to think of in literal terms how all of this gets depicted on one shield. It would have to be a very big shield to have all this depicted. So it's impossible in terms of the amount of detail that's all depicted. This is just one little band. There's still, the constellations, that river ocean I described. There's the city of war on the other side. There's scenes of pastoral life. All that has to be fit on this shield that's, maybe, 24 inches wide at the most. So it's impossible in terms of the level of detail, but it's also impossible in terms of painting being a static art, well, in this case, engraving being a static art. Okay, so it's not an art that can depict time or temporal flow, unlike narrative, right? So here the god Hephaestus as artist is depicting these people moving and singing and whirling round in rings, but he can't literally in a physical form. What's kind of alluded to here is the poet's art of telling a story that moves through time. The other thing I'll point out is, so we have a city in peace balanced, as we'll see in the description later, by a city at war. But even within the city at peace, there's potential for conflict. So in the passage we just saw, a quarrel had broken out and two men struggled over the blood price for a kinsman just murdered. So even in the city at peace, there's a site of conflict that needs to be brought into order. And then, as we'll see, in the city at war, there are pastoral scenes of peacefulness that are then enveloped by violence. So there's this kind of potential for one in the other and the other in the one. It's kind of like yin and yang have those kind of pockets of the opposite in one another. One declaimed in public, vowing payment in full. The other spurned him, he would not take a thing. So both men pressed for a judge to cut the knot. The crowd cheered on both. They took both sides, but heralds held them back as the city elders sat on polished stone benches forming the sacred circle, grasping in hand the staffs of clear-voiced heralds. And each leapt to his feet to plead the case in turn. 2 bars of solid gold shone on the ground before them, a prize for the judge who'd speak the straightest verdict. So there's potential conflict, and it's brought into order through the institutions of the city. So through law and through justice, in this case, a trial by jury. So there's a depiction of that all happening on the shield, right? But circling the other city camped a divided army. So now we're onto the city at war. But circling the other city camped a divided army, gleaming in battle gear. And 2 plans split their ranks, to plunder the city or share the riches with its people, hoards the handsome citadel stored within its depths. But the people were not surrendering, not at all. They armed for a raid, hoping to break the siege. So again, we have a city being sieged. What does this remind us of? The whole story is about this city that's been besieged for 10 years. And what we see when we look in Troy, we see glimpses of the city at peace. We see glimpses of let's say the flip side of this coin of war. And here again, this is being depicted in kind of in miniature on the shield. They armed for a raid, hoping to break the siege, loving wives and innocent children standing guard on the ramparts, flanked by elders bent with age as men marched out to war. So the people in the city that is being besieged are doing a raiding party to try to go out and attack the attackers. Ares and Pallas led them, both burnished gold the attire they donned, and great, magnificent in their armor. Gods for all the world looming up in their brilliance, towering over troops. And once they reached the perfect spot for attack, a watering place where all the herds collected, there they crouched, wrapped in glowing bronze. Detached from the ranks, 2 scouts took up their posts, the eyes of the army watching to spot a convoy, the enemy's flocks and crooked horn cattle coming. So here we have this pastoral scene of a flock being fed there. Come they did quickly, 2 shepherds behind them, playing their hearts out on their pipes. So they're playing music. So it's right out of a type of poetry called bucolic poetry or pastoral poetry, where it's separated from the world. It's in this idyllic landscape. Treachery never crossed their minds, but the soldiers saw them, rushed them, cut off at a stroke the herds of oxen and sleek sheep flocks glistening silver gray, and killed the herdsmen too. Now the besiegers, soon as they heard the uproar, burst from the cattle as they debated, huddled in council, mounted at once behind the racing teams, rode hard to rescue, arrived at once, and lining up for assault, both armies battled it out along the riverbanks. They raked each other with hurtling bronze-tipped spears, and strife and havoc plunged in the fight and violent death, now seizing a man alive with fresh wounds, now one unhurt, now hauling a dead man through the slaughter by the heels, the cloak on her back stained red with human blood. So they clashed and fought like living, breathing men, grappling each other's corpses, dragging off the dead. So they're a depiction of the two cities, the city at peace and the city at war. And here, as I mentioned, there's a diagram of this who put it here? This is from Brett Mulligan's article there. So I think what we don't need to go through every section of it. I just want to get a sense of how what's happening here is basically the whole cosmos is being displayed. Okay. It's displayed in a way where there are opposing elements in the cosmos in perfect balance. Okay, so there's war, which is necessary, there's conflict, which is necessary, and there's a city at peace, which brings conflict under a limit and order. And there's sky, there's earth and sea, there's sun, there's moon, there's all these things in balance. It refers to human history, sorry, it refers to human existence within the cosmos in a timeless way without a history. So people are doing things, there's movement, there's time, but it's not as though this is depicted as, okay, this is the age of the Greeks, before that there were Persians, before that this happened. It's depicted as this kind of scene could happen at any time in the ongoing cycles of nature. We'll contrast this with what we'll see in the Shield of Aeneas in the Iliad. So there we have a sense of history along with this depiction of the cosmos. Sorry, I have a bit of an issue here. Okay, so let's get back to where we were here. So just as the epic, this is the point I kind of brought up earlier, just as the epic is bringing together scenes of action and soldiers at war, but also contrasting it with Trojan life of peace. So we see that in the Shield. And the Shield, I really want to underscore, becomes this kind of image for the artistry that we see in the epic.